Hey, Louise here. Are you ready for half square triangles? The easiest half square triangles. I'm going to show you the tricks of how to make this simple and fast and accurate, and you're going to have the best half square triangles ever. 2 pieces of fabric. I use a contrast to whatever my primary is, and in this case I am using a bunch of batiks. This is actually a bundle of 100 different batiks that I got from the Fabric Hut, and they also had some white on white fabric, so this worked out really well for me. And I cut them into 5-inch squares. Then what we're going to do is draw a line. Now there is a line here, but it's in pencil, so I want to do it with a darker marker so you can see exactly what we're doing. And the trick is corner to corner, and you really need to get it right in that corner. You see where it is right there? Where it is right here? You don't want to go to one side or the other. You want to get it right in that center, because if you're to the side, look at this. It's going to all be off and wonky, and you're not going to have a good half square triangle, and that's a very sad thing. We don't want that to happen. Now, once we've got the pieces all put together, we've got everything cut, we have everything marked, it's time to sew. And the first thing we do is we're going to put this in our machine with our corners lined up, and we want to make sure everything is square. So look on both sides, make sure that we don't have anything that's a little off, because if you lay them flat and you lay them square initially, you're going to get a great finish. And if need be, put some pins on each side. What I usually do is I'll just hold it down here. I'll line this up. I'm going to put this under my needle, put the presser foot down, hold here, and sew. But remember, this line, I'm going to show you on this one because this was the darker line. This line is your cutting line. So you are going to sew 1/4 inch from one side. And you're going to come all the way down, 1/4 inch, turn around, and come back up. And when you do that, you'll have a piece that looks like this. You see 1/4 inch down and 1/4 inch back. Now, to make this faster and easier, what we're going to do is chain stitch this. So check this out. We're going to put our pile, our, what are they, squares in a pile, and we're going to sew halfway, we're going to sew on the half side, one side only, all the way through. And you can't really see the white on white here as far as the thread, but I'm showing you on the back so you can see the stitching. You're just going to put a bunch of them together, and then you turn it around and you come back the other direction. Once you're here, all you need to do is cut these in half, or apart, I should say, not really in half. And then once they're cut, we're ready to start doing the trimming. And I mean, this just goes so quickly when you do it this way. So let's kind of move some of that out. And what we're going to do is lay this. You can choose to press it first. I do when I have a bunch of them, like when I have them all strung together like this, I'll just lay them on the ironing board and go press, press, press. And I'm just pressing down. Don't iron them, just press them down, and that's just going to set your stitches. And we want to cut exactly corner to corner, not a little here, not a little there. We want to go right down the center. That way we get nice, even seam allowances on both sides. That's really important. Then we're going to press, and we're going to press to the dark side. And the reason we're doing that is we don't want any shadows on our blocks, because if we put the seam allowance to the white side, you can see that little bit of a shadow in there, and I'd rather not have that. Now, I have some over here that are already pressed, and what I want to show you is how we're going to do our trimming. And this is so simple. It sounds like it's sort of over-dramatized, I think. And it's just because if you haven't done it, it's unfamiliar. I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do. A ruler. I prefer square rulers, and I have them in multiple sizes. I have small ones, I have large ones, And whatever works is what you need to get, whatever you're comfortable with. If you're going to start with one size and just do some of these small ones, get a smaller ruler. This is 5-inch. It's perfect. The smaller the ruler, the fewer angles you're going to have. So if you get the next size up, so this is a 6-inch ruler, I have the 45 and I have a 60. So check the rulers out, determine what it is you want, and then pick the one that works. You can also use your straight edge like this, but a square works best. All right, I'm going to line it up on the grid because I want this bottom corner right here to be within these two lines. Whoops, let me bump that up. Sorry, you can't even see. So we're going to bump this up right there. This corner is along that line and that line. And I'm making sure that these two sides are on the line as well. Now I'm going to take my ruler, and this 45-degree line is going to go right on my seam. And I want to do it without moving my square. There we go. All right. Now, I want my 4.5-inch to be on this line and my 4.5-inch to be on this line. We are using 5-inch charm squares, and when we do a half square triangle, we have a 1/4-inch seam from each fabric. So that means our 5-inch square is being reduced to 4.5 inches. And that's before we take the seam allowance. The finished half square triangle is going to be 4 inches. So let's go ahead and we'll take off our trimming. You see that little bit? That's all there is. One side and then the other. The key thing you need to watch for is that this corner is inside within those lines. If it's coming up short and you're not making it all the way, this is going to be unable to sew because it's going to come in at a wonky angle and it's not going to fit, and you're not going to be able to get that row sewn together. You want to make sure that you've got it here. Now let's say, for example, let's do this one. I'll do both sides on this and show you what I'm talking about here. So we've got our 4.5-inch. I'm going to put this on my 4 and my 4. Okay, this is a great example. Can you see that? I'm going to take you in just a little bit closer. Here's what we're going to do. I put my half square triangle on the line here and here. But see how it doesn't come all the way down to the corner? You see how there's that little bit of space? That's a problem, because if I cut this without that being all the way to the 4.5, it's going to be short. These are the key things you need to watch for. If you watch for these points, you're not going to have any trouble. Now, the first thing I do if that happens is I turn it the other way, because there's a good chance the block is going to work on the other direction. I've got a 50-50 chance, right? And so there we are. See, this lines up great, and now I can go ahead and cut this. With my square aligned, I'm within the corner, I'm on these edges. I'm going to put my 45 right on this line, my angle, and I'm going to make 4.5 line up here and 4.5 line up here. But I want to keep that line, that diagonal, that 45-degree line right on my seam. And it's going to come right off here. So where this corner lines up, you're going to have a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch here. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Now, there's very little we have to trim on this side, but this is the side that's off. So now we have a beautiful 45-degree cut diagonal across our half square triangle. Here's one other thing you need to look for. If your ruler does not line up exactly with this line, that point is going to be either to one side or the other. And if that point isn't right in the middle, you're going to have a really hard time aligning your half square triangles. So now this one down here, it's square. I'm good. I just want to trim off that extra seam allowance, the little point there, and right there. There we go. We just trim that corner off. You can also do it with a pair of scissors if you need to, if you're sewing along and find that it's there and it needs to be taken care of. But this is really important. So remember, you want to cut it at 4.5, making sure that the inside seam is within those markings and doesn't come up short. And then you want to make sure that this diagonal line follows your diagonal seam. And once you do that, you will have a pile of beautiful, perfect half square triangles. Look at them. Now, watch what we can do with this. Now that we have all these beautifully trimmed half square triangles, what do we do with them? Well, there's some very simple layouts that you can do. And with just 4 squares, you can come up with some really fun ideas. And, you like to do a square and a square, and you see how I just reversed that easily. But here's another block that is kind of fun to do. Now, when we look at putting our blocks together, if I were to say, put a 4 square and sew it, you're going to sew these 2 and then across there. And it's simple, it's easy. But if I said, oh, we're going to do 16 squares, we might get a little bit nervous and think, oh, I can't do that many. Well, let me show you how we can turn this into a 16 patch. Here's the same 4 patch we're working with. And if I duplicate that and turn it just the other direction, so you see it's this way, all the points are going this way. But if I just turn this whole thing a 1/4 turn, now I have this block here. So if I make 2 of these and I just turn 1 1/4 turn, I can create this. And you see how we chain piece. So I do all 4 together and chain piece them that way. For me, it's just easier. If you prefer to do the 4 patches you go, then what I would do is chain piece these, and I would then come back and sew these together right there. Now, let's take it one step further, because what we want to do is create a 16 patch. I only have 2 rows here. I have 8 blocks. So what I'm going to do is take this block right here, or that strip, I should say, and turn it in the other direction. Now, do you see what's developing here? Do you see these flying geese? So each quadrant has flying geese going in different directions. So these are going outward and these are coming this way. Now we're going to top it off up here, just like that. And so you see, you can get such different looks. And again, here you can see how I chain pieced it. And we've got the points. What I do want to show you is, let's see, I think I pressed this one here. No, let's take a look at this one. Okay, so I want to show you how your piecing or your stitching is going to go as you're sewing your blocks. And you see how that point there is about 1/4 inch in. So that's what creates the point of your triangle. And as you're sewing, you want to sew on the seam allowance side of that point. If you sew inside that point, you're going to cut it off. And your triangles are going to have blunt corners. And we want them to be nice and sharp. So you can see, here we go. This one. See how they're lined up together? And they meet up right there. And that's because this seam right here is going across that point, and it's also lining up on this side. So when I'm putting my blocks together, I make sure that these points align. So I'll hold it up like this, and I'm going to put them together, and they align. I'll pin that, and then sew right through. So it's just like, let's say this one here. And I have these 2. I want them to line up. so that they come nested like this. So I'm going to put it here. I'll hold this, pin it to hold it in place, and then sew. And then when I open that up, I'm going to get a nice corner, a nice, what do I want to say, a nice point right here, but it'll be a 1/4 inch in, just like these are. So those are some of the things to think about as you're sewing. And it's just your 1/4 inch. There's nothing fancy, different, or difficult about it. And here's another one. But what I want to show you is how we can easily change up our pattern. So remember, whoops, there we go. On this one, notice how the center is white. So here's our 4 square right here. We go 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so this then we get right there. This becomes that. Whoops, if you do it the right way. Okay. This becomes that. And then when I turn this, it's the same block. And I turn this, and it's the same block. So there's so much you can do with a simple 4-patch. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. Now, here's another fun one that I really enjoy doing. And this one is going to go like this. Do you see what this is? Right there. Now think about it. If you had 4 of these and you turned them around, what would they look like? Well, they're going to look like a star. Check that out. Here it is right here. And there it is. Do you see that? And see how easy that goes together? And the points, I haven't pressed this until I sew my blocks together into the quilt top, because I just want to, again, depending on how my seams are going to go, since I'm making each block individually. But see, we want these to all come together nice and aligned. This is a little bit thick right there. But when you have 2, you're going to have a wider seam, and you can decide whether you like to press them open or to the side, and that's just a personal preference. But we want to get these corners all lined up nice and even. And there's one more I want to show you, and the only difference is this. So here we have a white center, the background, with a wider, heavier piece star, right? The star points. Whereas this one, we change this, and we are going to get, let's see. Oh, I had already changed it, or did I do this first? Okay, now y'all got me confused. This is the one we did, right? Okay, we did that all the way around. That's right, and then we turned it this way. And now, instead of this star, we get this star. And it's just very easy to do these blocks. When you see half square triangle blocks, they can be quite intimidating because there's so many directions. But if you look closely, there's some place where it comes together into a quadrant, and there are 4 pieces that are identical, and they go together, but they just get turned around. So there it is. I know you can do this. You're going to love doing it. Start with some 4 patches and just try some different layouts and put them together. And if you want, instead of sewing them with a regular stitch, use a basting stitch. Use a long stitch, and then you can see how they look, and that way it's easier to pull the stitching out, and you can try another pattern. Over time, obviously, those seam allowance areas are going to get kind of frayed and chewed up, but it's a good way to practice initially to try some different layouts and see what works for you. I think you're going to have a fantastic time with this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope that you are ready to do your own. Easy triangles, easy half square triangles. This is going to be a lot of fun, and there's so much you can do in your quilts. So go with it, get inspired, get excited, and make yourself some half square triangles. Thanks so much for being here. As always, it is such a pleasure to have you following along. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend.